The indices of life satisfaction are pretty high in Scandinavia, but I don't know if anybody has done an analysis that would indicate whether the sexual sorting is a contributor to that. That's a good question. I mean, the general idea has been that the Scandinavians are happier because their societies are more egalitarian, but they're not more egalitarian in the sense that men and women are also more different. So
men and women are more different, but the opportunities are more egalitarian.
Yeah. And then the societies are more satisfied. But it's tough, because there's other variables, because the Scandinavian countries are relatively homogenous, right? And more homogenous societies tend to be more peaceful and happier, not more diverse societies. And they're also small countries, so they're somewhat easier to govern.
Right.
And they tend to be wealthy. So it'd be hard to parse out all those contributors, right? To figure out what it is that's making the Scandinavians relatively content.
This is almost like a super tribe versus a country.
Yeah, right. Well, and those sorts of societies, in some sense, are easier to manage.
Is there any benefit to this model that we could perhaps bring to the United States or to Canada and maybe mitigate some of the issues that we have between the right and the left? Like maybe there's some sort of a compromise that'll lead to a less debate and dispute.
Well, I think that you guys in the States are doing real well, actually, personally. I mean, your system of checks and balances seems to work out pretty well. There's a fair bit of, let's say, left domination right now of the mainstream media. I think that's a reasonable claim, and also of academia and of the intelligentsia. But the political system is skewed pretty hard to the Republican end of things at the moment. And so that's not a bad balance. And then in the last election, I mean, maybe you could make a case, perhaps, that things had tilted a little too far to the Republican side, but that got balanced out because the Democrats took the House again. And it seems like they were more moderate Democrats. That seems to be the scuttlebutt. So, it isn't obvious to me that your system isn't functioning well. I think that one of the things that's happening that's making things look more contentious than they are is that the mainstream media is under such assault by the up-and-coming media forms, including people like you, that as their financial models deteriorate, and as their journalistic standards take a hit, and as they lose their fact checkers and their time to be careful with the stories, they concentrate more on exaggerating the extremes to attract attention. And so, there was an article published in the Atlantic Monthly about a month ago showing that, and it depends on how you calculate these things, but that the radical leftists and the radical right-wingers are only about 5% of the population on each side. And that the vast majority of Americans consider themselves something approximating the relatively silent majority. And so I don't think that things are polarized as badly as they seem. And it is also the case right now that if you poll people and ask them about the conditions of their life in the United States, they tend to say that they're doing quite well, but that other people aren't. And so I think maybe, I don't know this for sure, but I think maybe that the technological pressure that's being put on the mainstream media is driving extreme political views as a means of gathering the attention of a shrinking market share.
That's a very interesting take on it, and I wonder how detrimental that is to us as a whole, because we are constantly dealing with this clickbait nonsense headline, and everything is a dispute, everything's a war.
Well, it's nerve-wracking.
Yes.
I noticed this years ago, because I really stopped watching the news 25 years ago, although I've been heavily involved in it the last 2 years, because I noticed that most of what passed for news wasn't. Because my sense was, well, if it isn't important a month from now, it was never important. And almost everything that's news is like important right now.
Yeah.
And so I tried to stay away from that. It was better for my peace of mind. And I often recommended to my clinical clients who were depressed and anxious that they shield themselves from the news as much as possible. But now the news is everywhere, right? It's everywhere. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's YouTube. It's like we're just inundated by it. It's like CNN on steroids. It's 24-hour news cycle, and it's produced by everyone, whether they're informed or not, and it's really high emotion, and I think that is making things look a lot worse to us than they actually are. So the ability to care for helpless, frequently upset, dependent creatures for a very long period of time
is part of our behavioral repertoire. Now then you might wonder, are there individual differences in the degree to which people are maternal? And I think that's captured at least in part with agreeableness. It makes sense because on the positive pole of agreeableness, that's where you get warmth and compassion and empathy and the desire to care for others and self-sacrifice, I would say. One of the things we'll show later is that agreeableness is negatively correlated with income, which is exactly what you'd expect if you were negotiating with someone who was self-sacrificing, because they're not going to put forward their side of the power equation as forcefully as someone who is disagreeable. So, but you know, in order to raise a baby, you have to be self-sacrificing. There's no two ways about it. You might find that rewarding and worthwhile, but I don't believe there is a parent who actually becomes a good parent who doesn't put their child's welfare first, and I think that's particularly true of mothers, particularly in the first year after birth. It's probably true right up to the age of 3, but I think it's virtually undeniably true for the first year.
Stage, like toddlers, I know what to do with them. I can play with kids, but when they're under a year, they're like a foreign object to me in many ways. I don't know what to do, and so that worries me. And so I'll tell you what, if you'll take primary care for the infant, I'll take care of you and the infant. And how would that be? And I think that's the right role. I really do believe that. And you might think, well, that's sexist. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. How are you so sure that that first year as a mother isn't one of the great parts of the fundamental adventure of being female? Like, so don't give me any crap about that being sexist. That's just, I don't think so. You know, and so what I would do is watch my wife, and if she got tired, spell her off. And I did what I could to take care of the infant, but I knew that, you know, she would take care of that while I stumbled around trying to learn how. And she did that, and that worked fine. And then, you know, as the kids got older, I took more and more responsibility for them. And when my daughter was about 2.5, I think that's right, 1.5, we had our second child. And then I took care of Michaela, the older child, quite a lot after that, because Tammy, of course, was busy, especially that first year with the infant, with Julian. But that worked well. That was a good division of labor as far as I was concerned. And also my wife was very happy about that because she loved to take care of infants. And that's characteristic of a lot of women, you know, and even those that don't admit it. And it's too bad they don't admit it, because what, there's something wrong with that? Is there something? I saw this tweet the other day about this grandmother, mother of a mature daughter, and the daughter had announced that she was never going to have kids, and her mother said, "Oh, I think that's just great. You know, you're gonna just live for you, and that's just wonderful, and I'm glad you can be so independent." And I thought, how could you possibly say something that stupid to your daughter?